welcome back to my channel, Elo for Life, and today we're going to go over a tutorial on how to make a wig on a sewing machine for beginners. So the first thing you're going to need is your spandex cap, as you see here. You're going to need the canvas head that is according to your size, of course. And I'm just making sure that the spandex cap is the spandex dome cap. It's fit according to the way that I want it to fit. Now, you don't have to use a spandex dome cap. You can use a mesh cap. You can use an adjustable wig cap, or whatever you feel comfortable making a wig. So the first thing I'm doing here is just making sure that I'm bringing the frontal. I am using the frontal. I'm just making sure the frontal is going to fit correctly on the spandex dome cap itself. Because what you're going to see next, is me tracing around that frontal. Now, this technique that I'm currently doing is a technique that I saw on Erica J's, I Am Erica J's channel. I've never made a sewing machine wig before, and I wanted to attempt to master this skill as well, because I do make wigs or custom wigs for clients and for customers, and this is something that I definitely want to master. So I'm going to have to definitely practice this several times to make sure I can get the sewing machine method down, technique down right. So just like with any other wig, you're just going to make sure that your frontal or closure is fitting correctly on your spandex cap. And like I said before, I'm going to just pull the hair out in front to get it out my way, just so that I can go ahead and make that tracing around the frontal, because I'm not going to sew it on there at this point. I'm going to actually take it off. Now, if you want to see, you can actually go to I Am Erica J's channel and see the technique, how she do it, because I'm doing exactly how she's doing it as well. And that's how I learn. I learn from watching other YouTubers on YouTube, and then I try to attempt them myself. The type of Sharpie that I'm using is a gray metallic Sharpie, and I like this Sharpie because you can definitely it gives the appearance of seeing those lines greatly on a dome spandex cap. So here we can get that traced around, and we're going to go ahead and continue with the process. Now, there's other Sharpies colors. You can use gold, metallic gold, and brown, but I just like the silver one better because it shows up better on a spandex cap, and you can get that anywhere. So the next thing that I'm doing is I'm just tracing my lines across the spandex dome cap, and you're going to want these, because these are basically your guidelines. You're going to want these guidelines because you're going to need them when you actually sew your tracks onto your cap. I'm not a pro at this. Some people can do it without having to draw lines on their cap, but I just feel like it's a great method of using. That way I know how many tracks that I will be placing on my wig. When I do stitch wigs, I usually freestyle it. I don't trace the lines, but like I said before, because I'm using the sewing machine method for the first time, I definitely want to trace those lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I did 10 lines at the top, and then I think I did about 3 lines across. So that's about 12 tracks. Now, what you will see in the next clip is me actually doubling those tracks. And I think it turned out pretty perfect. So if you are a beginner in making a wig, or either where you're stitching or a sewing machine, the best thing to do is go ahead and trace that onto your cap. Now, the hair that I'm using is from my own hair collection, ilovewigs.com. I am using the loose wave, and I'm going to use 3 bundles of this, 12, 14, and 16 inch. And I'm going to actually double the tracks on here on my sewing machine. Now, if you haven't seen me double the tracks before, you can go back to where I was making a drawstring ponytail, and I'll put that below in my description to show you how I was doubling my tracks. But I'm pretty much just going to do the same thing here. The best way to double is to go ahead and fold your hair on the fold of the bundle and make sure it matches up. I have to get better at doubling tracks on a sewing machine, because you can definitely mess up your while doubling those tracks. when you don't keep them close together, you can actually sew on the hair itself, and then that can cause slippage later on, because I actually did that. So that's one technique I definitely need to practice on. So that's just me putting the tracks close together. And at the end of the track, at the end of that fold down there on a sewing machine, you're going to want to not start at the very end. You're going to want to bring it up. The stitching, you want to bring it up above the fold. And then you want to stitch, and then you want to back stitch to close it up. And like here, I'm actually using a zigzag stitch all the way across the doubling of the bundle. And that's the easiest way that I found how to double the tracks. Don't start at the very end. Start up some and then go back. And you just have to make sure you're keeping those tracks close together. I'm going to try to find a better way to double tracks, because I did mess up a few times, and I actually was sewing on the hair. It did bring the hair close together, but the thing about it is, if your tracks are spaced too far apart, you're stitching on the hair and not on the track itself. And like I said before, they can come apart. So I'm going to play around with my sewing machine and maybe the stitch method. Find a better way to double stitch. And you don't necessarily have to buy a, I have a Brothers, and both of my sewing machines are Brothers. I like Brothers sewing machines. The latest one I have just bought is a Broadway Unlimited edition. And I like that a lot, because the stitching is, when you are trying to stitch, it's computerized. So I have to get used to it, but that's what I'm currently using here in this video to double my tracks. And I also use the same sewing machine when I was when I was creating my drawstring ponytail. So I'm just getting used to. And if you can just see a little bit along the way on that track how some of it's not close together. So that you definitely have to practice. And this is something I definitely want to get down perfectly before I start making sewing machine wigs for my clients. So the best person to practice on is me. And I'm definitely going to practice on making sewing machine wigs on different caps. So let's go ahead and get finished with this one bundle. And once you do one bundle and get used to doing one bundle, you can do all the other bundles. So I did double stitch all 3 of my bundles for the wig that I'm currently making. And I'm almost at the end, and you're just currently seeing me back stitch. And one thing I love about this sewing machine when back stitching is that you have a button that back stitch slowly. So next, I've already placed one track on the cap, and I don't have the clip for that. I must have forgot to start the recording, but I'm going to show you in this clip exactly how to place the wig on the bundle on the cap. And like I said before, you need to bring it up some, stitch it a little bit, and then back stitch it. I find that to be much easier. And all you're really going to do is just follow the guidelines on your cap. Now what you really don't want to do is stretch your cap out, especially since this is a spandex dome cap and not a mesh cap. And you will see in my upcoming video the results of my wig, and I will give you the pros and cons, what I liked about stitching on the spandex dome cap and what I didn't like about it. But as you can see, one of my mistakes, and I will tell you here, is me placing the cap around the outer edge of my sewing machine while stitching. You don't want to do that, y'all. Not with a spandex dome cap. Maybe with a mesh cap, because those things fit a little bit tighter. But spandex dome caps are very spandexy, so you definitely do not want to do that. And that's just me showing you how it looks on the cap itself. And you want to do that all the way up throughout the entire cap itself to the very top. And it didn't take any time at all. And as I go along, I check the cap itself. I clip off any loose strings. I do cut my tracks. I do not overlap, not with on the sewing machine, Now when I do stitch by hand for my customers and clients, I do overlap the tracks because I try to keep the track in whole as much as possible. And when I do stitch for my customers, a lot of times what I usually do is single track the bundle on the cap itself. And that's just me putting it back onto my canvas head because I am a 22 and a half. I am that is my measurements for me, and I'm just putting it back just to see how it looks and see how it lays, if it's gonna look a little bulky or whatever. But this is a great method. It's very easy to stitch it on the cap. So if you are thinking about doing that, don't be afraid. Just try it. Practice makes perfect, and that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to practice, and try to get this technique down as good as possible, the best way that I can. In this next clip, you're just gonna see how far I've gotten to the top. You can see a little bit of bulkiness right there where I messed up, but this is the hard part that I had. The hard part I had is trying, once I got all the way around the rounder outer edges of my cap, I find it very hard when you get closer to the top with a sewing machine, that it gets a little bit more difficult to maneuver that cap around the sewing machine. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to go ahead and just hand stitch the lines across. Since I've already got them across, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. But I did want you all to see what I've done so far once I've gotten closer to the top of the cap. And that's just you showing me that 1, 2, 3 lines across. So I'm going to double stitch, take my double stitch weft and just stitch it, hand stitch it myself. And here at this point, I'm also going to hand stitch the frontal back onto the cap itself. So I laid my spandex dome cap back on my canvas head, and I'm going to go ahead and get that frontal back on there. And it's a lot easier to not have the frontal on your cap while you're sewing on the sewing machine, because you don't want all that hair to get in the way, and it can get in the way. Until I can find a better way of doing it, this is the way that I'm going to do it, and this is the way I Am Erica J did it as well. So stay tuned to my next video so you all can see the results of my cap. Thank you so much for watching.